Strange and rampant, demonic and chaotic times, the suffering of the world is unbearable. Corrupt officials, hasty disregard for human life, aristocratic families, causing trouble on one side. Chen Mo descended into this world with a molting pearl, capable of constantly transforming and improving his physical body infinitely. In order to seek self-protection in this world, he had to embark on a path of suppressing the eerie world with his physical body. Keywords of the novel. Strange world, I use my body to control all things without pop-ups. Strange world, I use my body to control all things. Download the complete TXT collection, Strange world, I use my body to control all things. Read the latest chapter of the book. Chapter 1. Escape from Wilderness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Escape from Wilderness. In the 5th year of the reign of Emperor Chen Mo, there was a severe drought in Qingzhou, and people were starving at the age. White bones exposed in the wilderness, thousands of miles without rooster crowing. In the vast expanse of heaven and earth, only 2 colors of withered and yellow remain, and all things have long fallen silent. Not to mention birds and beasts, even snakes, insects, mice, and ants have not a single one. However, in this desolate scene, there were one thin figure after another, with a numb expression and a stumbling gait. They are people, refugees. From time to time, someone falls to the ground and never gets up again. Chen Mo's expression was dull and numb, and his body was withered, as if it could be blown down by a gust of wind. In order to keep warm, he wore layers of clothing that he had peeled off from someone unknown. He couldn't remember exactly how many days he had been in this world, and all he had left in his heart was one thought. Hunger, to eat. When you look at it, there is nothing to eat in the world, even the bark on the dead wood has been stripped clean. He didn't have the extra strength to think, he just took a numb step forward. He is not sure if there is really a way forward, but if he stops, he will definitely die. After walking for an unknown amount of time, a low thatched hut appeared in front of me. Chen Mo paused and turned his head to look back. Behind him, there was a withered and slim figure that was not much different from him, covered in mud and layers of tattered clothes. But compared to him, the other person is shorter and thinner. Chen Mo didn't know his name, age, gender, and in fact, the two of them didn't say much together. But during these days of escape, both sides have formed a factual alliance. It is too dangerous to escape alone, and one may be caught as a vegetable. 2 people watching and helping each other is somewhat safer. There are many refugees who are left alone, why take the risk of targeting 2 people? Not to mention, if you accidentally fall, there may be a chance to stand up with someone's help, and relying on yourself can only wait for death. Or if you can't sleep in the morning, some people may shout and have a chance to wake up, but if no one cries, you will slowly die in your sleep. The other party was not his first companion. Chen Mo had many companions before, some of whom were killed by him because of a little food. More often, after falling asleep, they can no longer shout. The companions behind them had a numb expression without any change. They were too hungry and had no energy to do any unnecessary thinking or expressions. Chen Mo saw that he was still following, so he felt at ease and continued walking towards the thatched hut. He walked slowly, more so than moving slowly. Gradually approaching the thatched hut, Chen Mo saw a gray-black figure who was clearly stronger than him. The person did not avoid him when he saw him, but instead took the initiative to approach him. Chen Mo was immediately alert in his heart. After fleeing for so long, in most cases when encountering other refugees, both sides would take the initiative to maintain a distance. Because no one is certain whether the other party will treat themselves as food. And this time there were 2 of them, and the other dared to lean over first. What are you doing? Chen Mo gathered his strength and whispered as the other person gradually approached. The person paused and looked up and down at Chen Mo, then at his companions behind him. It seems to be comparing the height, weight, and strength between the 2. However, in the eyes of the 2, there was an unconscious desire for food. Brother, I see you've been hungry for so long. I have some food, why don't we have some together? He squeezed a smile on his face and unconsciously swallowed his saliva. Okay. Chen Mo smiled, not in a hurry to refuse. Okay, you'll follow me. Hearing Chen Mo agree, his eyes couldn't help but show joy. Hurriedly turning to leave, Chen Mo gritted his teeth and took 2 big steps, reaching out his hand to tightly grip the other person's neck. He had a dagger on his body, but the other person, like him, was wearing layers of clothing and couldn't make a cut. The person who was strangled by him tried his best to resist, but Chen Mo's feet were unstable and he fell heavily to the ground. He still held on to the other person tightly and never let go no matter what. In the current world, people are afraid of others taking their food, and no one would be willing to share their food with others. The other party must not have a good heart, most likely treating him and his companions as food. Although the companion didn't know what was happening, he still stumbled and caught up, pulled out the iron plate he carried with him, and suddenly plunged into the other person's eyes. Ah! The person felt pain but didn't have much strength, so he couldn't shout out and could only whimper softly. His companion wanted to pierce deeper, but he had no strength. Helplessly, he could only press all his weight onto the dagger and slowly thrust in bit by bit. Chen Mo breathed a sigh of relief when he saw his companions coming. Fortunately, with his help, otherwise with my current strength, I wouldn't be able to strangle the other person. As the dagger completely penetrated the head, the person no longer struggled. My companion struggled to get up with a cane, and slowly moved the body away to help Chen Mo stand up from the ground. For the 2 of them, who have run out of lights and run out of oil, the extremely simple things they do on weekdays are like losing half of their lives. Crossing the corpses on the ground, the 2 of them helped each other and moved their steps, continuing to walk forward. They are very hungry, but they have not yet broken through the bottom line of being human. It is precisely because of this similarity that the 2 can form an alliance. When he came to the thatched hut, Chen Mo's eyes immediately straightened and he saw a pot of black congee. Hurry up and stir the spoons in the pot. There is everything in the soup, including unknown roots and stems, as well as some wheat and wild vegetables, and even 2 mouse heads and meat. Seeing the mouse head, Chen Mo felt relieved, indicating that the meat in the pot must be mouse meat. As for whether there was any other meat, he wouldn't think about it. Without considering anything else, Chen Mo scooped up a spoonful and sent it to his mouth. Sweet, refreshing sweetness. He could not describe the taste. The congee was more delicious than any delicacy he had ever eaten. Picking up the broken porcelain bowl next to the pot, Chen Mo quickly filled it up and handed it to his companions. Congee is very important, but he doesn't want to conflict with his companions. The next step is not clear, so they have to walk together. A pot of cooked meat porridge was cleaned up by the 2 people, even the pot and bowl were licked bright. After eating some food, Chen Mo finally had the strength to think about the problem. Should we leave now or stay overnight in the shack? The shack is rudimentary, but at least there is a lot of thatch to keep warm. Moving forward may not necessarily lead to finding the next shelter before dark. Whether the 2 of them will wake up tomorrow after spending the night outside is still unknown. Whether or not you have the strength to continue walking tomorrow is also an unknown factor. Chen Mo didn't want to think for too long, so he made a decisive decision and used the stick he found to support his body and walk outward. Companions are silent, just silently following. The 2 of them walked together, each time it was Chen Mo who made the decision. He had long been accustomed to listening to each other. Using a faster speed than before, Chen Mo kept moving towards the distance. As the 2 gradually moved away, the figure outside the shack suddenly sat up, and the dagger in their eyes disappeared, leaving no trace of injury. He stood up and walked into the shack, seeing the shiny bottom of the pot, with an infinite thirst for food in his eyes. Search everything in front of you, hoping to find some edible food. In the end, he turned his gaze to his own finger. Isn't this just a piece of meat? End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Selling Oneself as a Slave. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 2. Selling Oneself as a Slave. In the early morning, the sky was slightly bright. Chen Mo woke up early from hunger, and he was somewhat grateful that he could still wake up. He no longer remembers when he had his last meal, let alone the energy to think. Awakening their companions, the two of them didn't say much and silently rushed forward. I don't know how far I have gone, but the world is still desolate, and there are footprints left by cars and horses on the yellow soil below my feet. Seeing these traces, Chen Mo's heart couldn't help but be uplifted. This indicates that there must have been people walking forward, and the livestock have not been eaten, indicating that there is no shortage of food and there is a way to survive. Chen Mo tried his best to accelerate his pace, but no matter how hard he tried, his body, which was nearing the end of the lamp, could not move much faster. With the naked eye, the number of disaster victims around us has gradually increased, no longer like before when we couldn't see anyone for a day. Obviously, they also saw the nearby ruts and knew there was a way out, all gathering towards this place. Occasionally, some disaster victims fall down on the road, and no one pays attention. They just bow their heads and rush on. Chen Mo found a sunny tree and leaned against it to rest. He dared not sit or lie down, afraid that he wouldn't be able to get up as soon as he sat down. Chen Mo took out a black pancake from his pocket, divided it in half, and handed it to his companion. Even the crumbs that fell off when breaking the pancake were collected in his palm and carefully licked clean. This is the only food they have now, and if they can't walk to a place where there is a way to survive after finishing, they will end up together with the other disaster victims who fell on the road. After finishing the cake, Chen Mo didn't dare to stop any longer and continued along the path under his feet. Perhaps they had eaten a cake, or perhaps they saw hope, and their footsteps noticeably quickened a lot. As the sun in the sky shifted, the outline of the town slowly emerged. Chen Mo's brain was numb for many days, and finally had some emotions that belonged to humans. Although it was still far from the town, he seemed to smell the aroma of food. Getting closer to the town, the number of disaster victims in the town is actually not high, which indicates that there is really a way to survive in the town. Even selling oneself as a slave is better than starving to death. Chen Mo rummaged through layers of his clothes, remembering that he had money. Once, while he was peeling off the clothes of a dead body, he was lucky enough to find 17 large coins. Compared to other penniless refugees, his situation was relatively better. 17 won is not much, but it should be able to buy some food. Entering the town, the residents were not surprised to see the two of them, as they seemed accustomed to seeing the disaster victims. At first, they would still rescue the victims, but as the number of victims increased, they could only turn a blind eye. After all, in this world, no one's life is easy. How much does noodles cost per bowl? Chen Mo asked as he walked up to an open-air noodle stall. Noodles in soup are 7 won a bowl, and cakes are 3 won a bowl. Although Chen Mo is a disaster victim, the boss does not show any contempt, but still smiles and greets him. 2 bowls of noodles in soup, 1 cake. Chen Mo smiled. He is in a good mood now that he can eat. Give me the money first, the boss said. It seems that many disaster victims have eaten free food before. Chen Mo took out the copper plate, and the boss became much more enthusiastic. Okay, guest, please take a seat first. Chen Mo took a seat far away from other guests. He has been fleeing for several months, and he can adapt to the taste on himself, but others may not be able to adapt. Chen Mo waved to his companions, saying that he hadn't eaten anything and still didn't want to talk much. I don't have money, my companion moved to Chen Mo's side and spoke in a hoarse voice. The two of them had previously traveled together, relying on their lives. That was a helpless act during the escape. Now that there is a way out, the alliance that was previously necessary should naturally be dissolved. Although there is a way out in the town, I haven't seen it yet. And food is precious, taking an extra bite represents an extra chance to survive. It's okay, let's eat first. Chen Mo forced out a smile. Both of them are now on the brink of collapse, and being able to come to town is solely based on willpower. Without eating anything, they won't be able to survive until they can find a way out. Even if one sells themselves as slaves with their companions in the future, if they can be sold into the same household, they will inevitably have connections in the future. Even if they couldn't, at least they walked together for a long time and saved each other's lives. Now that he finally has the chance to survive, Chen Mo cannot watch him die. Thank you very much. My companion smiled and thanked me before I dared to sit opposite Chen Mo. 2 bowls of hot noodles in soup were served quickly. Noodles are the simplest boiled noodles, with no seasoning other than salt. Chen Mo cannot describe its taste. For him, it is the most delicious thing in the world. After a bowl of hot noodles and soup, Chen Mo finally felt like a living person. He asked the boss for a bowl of noodle soup again, took the freshly baked pancake, and Chen Mo broke a piece to share with his companions, but he was unwilling to take it. Chen Mo didn't show any courtesy to him, so he ate half of the cake with noodle soup, and kept the remaining half hidden with him. Brother, there's no way to survive in this town. Just give me a bite of food. Chen Mo handed the bowl of noodles back to the boss and asked with a smile. To the east of the town, there are several wealthy families in Beha County who are enslaved. You can try it out. Walk 60 miles east to Kingmuji, where the court will recruit soldiers. If it's not possible, you can go. The boss pondered for a moment and said. Chen Mo and his team arrived too late, and any better way of life and livelihood would have been snatched away by the disaster victims who came first. There are only 2 options left. Selling oneself as a slave and enlisting in the army, which are absolutely necessary to choose. Thank you very much, brother. Chen Mo said earnestly. Under the rule of General de Qian, the people were divided into countless hometowns based on their industry and status, with the most expensive being none other than scholars. Being a slave is the most lowly place of origin, as for military households, although their place of origin is not the lowest. The treatment suffered by Ko may be even greater than that of a servant. Not only can I not receive a penny of salary, but I also have to cultivate land for my superiors, endure the scolding of veterans, and even be used as cannon fodder in a real war. As the saying goes, it is better to be a servant than a soldier. Being a servant of others, at least one will not be forcibly conscripted onto the battlefield. Moreover, joining the army will require another 60 miles, and one may not be able to walk to the destination alive. There is a large household in the east of the town that accepts servants. Let's go and take a look, Chen Mo whispered to his companions, without mentioning the matter of joining the army. Okay, my companion chuckled bitterly, and after eating the food, he finally had some liveliness. No one is willing to be someone else's servant, given the options available. But they have no choice. What if they were slaves or maids? At least they could survive. The 2 of them walked slowly to the east of the town. Some people have built several thatched huts here, and more than 10 refugees are squatting inside to rest. Are you here to sell yourself? A short and chubby middle-aged man walked over and looked at the 2 with a gaze that scrutinized the goods. Yes, Chen Mo spoke in a deep voice, trying to make his voice appear as loud as possible. Male-female, the short and chubby man asked coldly. The refugees who were able to escape here, regardless of gender, were disheveled, thin in stature, and had weak and hoarse voices. Don't say you're not careful, even if you look carefully, you can't tell. Male. Chen Mo uttered a word. Don't, man. The short and chubby man waved his hand with a hint of disgust. My companion quickly took a step forward and softly shouted, I'm a woman. Grandma's son, come and inspect the goods. The short and chubby man shouted to a carriage next to the shack. A middle-aged woman dressed in a gray floral robe, with dark skin and a slender figure, jumped out of the carriage. Which one is a woman? Sun Pezi walked up to the two of them in a lively manner and asked in a slightly sharp voice. Me. My companion slowly moved forward. Grandmother looked at her up and down, her eyes slightly disdainful. She reached out and carefully touched her body before nodding and saying, "Cheng, come with me." Looking at his companions beside him, Chen Mo didn't know what to say. He wanted to congratulate them, but didn't know how to say it. What a world! Selling oneself as a slave has become a good thing. I'm not selling myself, I'm selling him. My companion spoke weakly. Are you selling her? Grandma's son glanced at Chen Mo. Chen Mo remained silent. Having traveled to this world for so long, he may not be unaware of other things, but he was clear about the difference between self-selling and side-selling. Selling oneself means selling oneself, without the opportunity to redeem oneself, and being a servant of others for a lifetime. Even if one has children and descendants, it is still the life of a servant. There is not much difference between selling and self-selling, only one thing is that he can be redeemed and there is also a chance to be released from slavery. He knows these things because he has sold himself before. At the beginning of his journey, in order to survive, he followed several disaster victims and sold himself to a landlord. Later, as more and more victims were affected and the landlord was completely robbed, he began to continue his escape. You come with me. His companion reached out and tugged at his sleeve, and Chen Mo followed closely behind. Moved to a withered tree not far away, my companion finally stopped walking. I don't want to sell myself into slavery. How about selling me and giving you the money? Whispered the companion. Chen Mo was not in a hurry to speak. Although he was a close friend of life and death, it was a forced action. He doesn't think that the other party will give him the money for selling his body for no reason. As long as a person lives, they will use money, even if they sell themselves as slaves. Having money is better than having nothing. But if you take the silver, you have to promise me something. In the future, you have to find a way to redeem me. She didn't want to be someone else's servant for the rest of her life. In fact, if there is a choice, no one is willing to succumb to slavery. She knew that even if she gave all the silver to Chen Mo, he would probably find it difficult to redeem herself in the future. It's not that she doesn't trust Chen Mo, it's because she knows that it's difficult for disaster victims to survive, let alone accumulate enough silver to redeem themselves. But she still wants to do it, with a thought, it's better than nothing. After she finished speaking, she stopped talking and just looked at Chen Mo quietly. Even if Chen Mo didn't agree to this matter, she decided to share some silver money with him when he turned around. If the other party was willing to treat her to dinner and keep her alive, she would also help him. Okay, I promise you that as long as I don't die in the future, I will find a way to redeem you. Chen Mo thought for a long time and promised. He rarely makes promises, but as long as there are, he will definitely do his best to fulfill them. Seeing Chen Mo agree, his companions tried their best to pull out an unattractive smile. The other party has been thinking for so long, which indicates that they have really carefully considered this issue, rather than agreeing without thinking for the sake of money. Redemption may no longer be an elusive hope. My name is Zhao Yu, and you, said the companion. Chen Mo. The two of them knew each other for a long time, and only then did they exchange names. The two of them discussed quietly again, and then went to sell themselves to Grandma Sunday. Not long after, Chen Mo received a promissory note, and Sun Pezi became a middleman. He sold Zhao Yu to the Lu family in Beha County as a slave under the identity of her husband, earning 5 silver coins. This was something that the two had discussed before. If he had no connection with Zhao Yu, he wouldn't be able to sell her. Take it. Sun Pezi counted out 500 yuan and threw it to Chen Mo. He took the money and counted it one by one. A living person can only sell for 5 coins in a disaster year. Don't worry, I can't do without you. Sun Pezi smiled brightly, and the money she sold beside her was much lower than the money she gave herself. She could make a lot of profit from it. As for redemption, Chen Mo earns if he doesn't redeem her, redeeming her earns even more. Put away this document. If you can really gather 20 taels of ransom silver, go to Dongsher in Beha County to find me. Sun Posey finished speaking and grabbed Zhao Yu as she was about to leave. Please wait a moment, let's talk about the conversation again, Chen Mo asked with a smile. Okay, but I'll just watch from the side. You two don't want to run away. Sun Posey was quite talkative. Although I am not worried that two disaster victims who are about to lose their way can run past me, I am still accustomed to threatening. Take some of this money. Chen Mo divided out 5 strings of money into 3 and handed them to Zhao Yu. He had sold himself before and knew that even if it was selling himself, it was best to have some money with him. I can't use so much, you take more. Zhao Yu only took a string of money. Although she sold herself as a slave, at least she wouldn't starve to death next. Without money, she would suffer at most. But if Chen Mo had no money, he might really starve to death. Chen Mo didn't continue to decline and divided the remaining money into 3 parts to keep close. I don't need this anymore, you can take it. Zhao Yu took the water bag she carried with her and handed it to Chen Mo, which was the only valuable thing on her body. Okay, Chen Mo did not refuse. Taking the water bag, the two of them remained speechless. Let's go. Zhao Yu grinned at him and slowly turned around to walk towards Grandma Sunday. Chen Mo also squeezed out a smile. Whether to survive or find a way to redeem Zhao Yu, he only has one way left now. Join the army. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Joining the army. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Joining the army. Chen Mo chewed on the dry food he had bought from the town and slowly moved forward. 60 miles away, whether it's far or near, without eating something, he can't get there. The dry and hard pancakes are swallowed into the stomach and digested as nutrients for the body. The reason why Chen Mo dares to join the army is not only because he is really at a loss, but also because he has a reliance. It's just this reliance, we can't use it now. That is a pearl, stored in the dantian of one's own abdomen, crossing into this world with oneself. The name of the bead is Shuafangzhu, and its function is also very simple, which is to help people transform and improve their physical strength. To transform oneself, one needs to accumulate enough qi and blood strength. Chen Mo has been traveling for several months now, either on his escape or on his way, and has not had a few full meals. It is impossible for any excess energy in blood to accumulate, so until now, the inner space of the Ju Fan Ju is still empty. But as long as you join the army, even if it's tough, it's better than escaping, and you can definitely slowly accumulate your strength and blood. Once enough qi and blood are accumulated, one can transform oneself into a new bone using the Jufanju. Chen Mo ate a small half of the dead face pancake, then took out the water bag that Zhao Yu had previously given him, filled it with 2 sips of water, and walked forward. At dusk and sunset, his figure was stretched to an extreme length. Chen Mo found a withered tree with a leeward side, rested overnight, and continued on his journey the next day. On the official road, besides him, there were many disaster victims who obviously went to join the army. It's better to live than to die. Even if you join the army, you can always have a meal to eat. Approaching noon, the sun was scorching and making people feel soft all over. Chen Mo finally caught sight of the black flag hanging low in the distance. He couldn't help but quicken his pace and continue to move forward. There are several dilapidated wooden tables under the flagpole, and several soldiers are sitting idle drinking tea, surrounded by 3 or 4 disaster victims. Are you also here to join the army? A chubby-looking soldier looked at Chen Mo and asked. Yes, Chen Mo nodded and answered. The chubby soldier stood up and moved his muscles, then asked another soldier, Old Lu, I remember we recruited enough people, right? Then he turned his gaze to Chen Mo and rubbed his fingers, the meaning quite obvious. There are too many disaster victims, and the soldiers who have to rely on forced labor or use criminal prisoners to make up for their numbers have now become a coveted commodity. They, who are responsible for recruiting soldiers, can also take advantage of this opportunity to make ends meet. Even if the refugees who have escaped don't have much money on them, they will never miss the 2 liang of meat on the mosquito's legs. Chen Mo's face was calm, he didn't say much, and his hands kept flipping over his body. He can directly take out a lot of money, but if he does, the other party will probably treat him as a scapegoat and take a big hit. After searching on his body for a long time, Chen Mo gathered 38 copper coins and handed them over with both hands. The chubby soldier smiled and took the copper plate, carefully counting it in a row on the table. These are not very enough, the chubby soldier Mithreya smiled like a Buddha. Catching a toad and urinating, regardless of whether Chen Mo still has money or not, he will have to continue to exploit it. Chen Mo's eyebrows and eyes sank, and he quickly shook his head and waved his hands. Sir, I only have so much money on me. The rest of the money is for food. He took out half of the leftover pancake as evidence of what he had said earlier. Seeing this, Bai Pangbing suddenly became impatient and asked in a more comfortable position. Tell me, what's your name? Chen Mo. Upon hearing this, the soldier named Lao Lu took out a wooden plaque and quickly engraved Chen Mo's name on it. Take your wooden card and go to the left camp to find Lao He. Bai Pang, the soldier, threw the wooden card to Chen Mo and reached out to the side camp. Finally, with a smile, he added, Don't worry, the military lord has collected some money. Don't worry, this money is not for nothing. Chen Mo took the wooden signboard and crossed over several refugees who were unable to join the army but refused to leave, walking towards the nearby camp. Inside the camp lay an older, dark-skinned veteran. Seeing someone approaching, his expression remained unchanged. He took a wooden sign and glanced at it before reaching out to point to another tent. Go there and wait. In another camp, there were many refugees who had escaped and were sitting on the ground without anyone speaking. They have escaped here through countless hardships, although they have not starved to death yet, they have run out of fuel and do not want to waste their energy talking too much. Chen Mo found an open space to sit down and waited silently without saying a word. After an unknown amount of time, several more disaster victims walked into the camp. Among them, there were actually 2 people who were previously unable to receive money and could only wait outside, and it is unknown why they were able to come in. You guys, come with me. The chubby soldier walked into the tent with a cold face and waved his hand, pointing at a few people. Chen Mo was also among them, and immediately stood up to leave with the other party. Don't say I took your money for nothing, you guys should choose this clothes first. Bai Pang's soldiers led them into a tent. Inside the tent were many standardized gray old military uniforms, which were identical to the clothes he was wearing. As for armored weapons, it has nothing to do with these disaster victims. Being able to receive a set of military uniforms is already a good thing. Chen Mo glanced at these military uniforms and found that most of them were severely worn out, with only a few remaining intact. First, there are still a few good items to choose from, while those behind can only take torn clothes. At first glance, it seems that I have joined the army quite early. Even if someone comes later, they can still choose first, and I'm afraid they won't be able to find a few good clothes. Chen Mo picked a set of clothes that matched his height and were relatively intact and clean. He held it in his hand and didn't rush to change it. Go wash it clean, change into clothes, and I'll see you off later, said the chubby soldier. These recruited new soldiers naturally cannot stay here, but must be sent to various military camps. As for whether to farm or raise livestock in the military camp, or serve as a servant to serve the family of a certain general, it can only depend on luck. Anyway, training has absolutely nothing to do with them. When they join the army, it's not much different from selling themselves into slavery. 7 or 8 large wooden pots were placed next to the well outside the camp. There is warm water inside, but in fact, the weather is not very cold now. The reason why disaster victims wear thick clothes is mainly because they are too hungry, which is why they feel cold. Chen Mo untied the layers of clothes on his body and began to carefully scrub it. There are too many people and too little water. If you don't wash it quickly now, it's impossible to wash it clean later. And now the sun is booming and there is no wind, so it's not cold after washing. If we wait a little longer, it's hard to say. Several other disaster victims also followed suit and began to carefully scrub their bodies. By the time they were scrubbed clean, the clean water had turned into a muddy black mud. Chen Mo asked for scissors again to trim his dry, yellow, and wild grass-like hair, making it as neat as possible. Finally, he changed into a rough military uniform, and although Chen Mo was still skinny, he finally looked a bit more human. Walking to the pile of clothes he had taken off earlier, he first put away the pancake and water bag, and carefully retrieved the remaining few coins of silver. Out of the remaining torn clothes, pick out 3 sets that are still in good condition, and carefully wrap them up with another piece of torn clothes. Although these sets of clothes are dirty and smelly, as long as they are washed clean, they can still be used for changing clothes without spending money to buy them again. Other disaster victims, like him, carefully selected a few decent clothes and put them away. The chubby soldiers saw that they had all been scrubbed clean, so they went to take other disaster victims to choose military uniforms and clean their bodies. Later disaster victims had to wear military uniforms and wash their bodies with the mud and water they had washed. After receiving your money, don't say I didn't take care of you. You guys will go to the military camp later. As for what you do there, it depends on your own fate. Bai Pang's soldier approached the others again. Compared to other disaster victims who are directly sent to the military camp for farming, going to the military camp is somewhat better. Chen Mo chewed on his remaining half of the cake, and the resentment of being exploited in his heart had already dissipated. Although the other party is a bit greedy, at least from their current performance, it seems that they have taken the money and are really doing things, which is considered good. Chen Mo and his companions followed by Pang's soldiers to a large locust tree outside the camp. In the shade of the locust tree, a toothless black man sat leisurely. Seeing Chen Mo and his companions stand up and carefully examine them, he complained, "Why are we all disaster victims? There's no one else. If there is any other way to survive, who the hell is willing to join the army?" "These few are considered good," replied the chubby soldier. The toothless black man sighed helplessly and stood up to greet a few people. "Follow me, take you to the military camp." After speaking, he hunched his body and walked ahead, with Chen Mo closely following behind. He has eaten a lot in the past 2 days and has gained some strength. Now he doesn't need to rely on sticks when walking. As we walked towards the west of the sun, several rows of earthen barracks and a spacious schoolyard appeared in front of us. Unlike previous recruitment camps, this is the real military camp. "Are you here?" An old man wearing a floral jacket with grooves on his face walked over and asked. "That's all, you have to pick first. You see which one you want." The toothless black man spoke respectfully, indicating that the old man has some status in the military camp. The old man looked at the few people with a scrutinizing gaze. "You come with me." He reached out and pointed to Chen Mo. Compared to the others, Chen Mo was significantly taller and looked younger and stronger. "Go ahead and feed the horses well with Officer Hima," the toothless black man waved his hand. The other few disaster victims couldn't help but cast envious glances at Chen Mo upon hearing this. Feeding horses is undoubtedly a good trick because they can steal feed. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Stability. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Stability. Fresh horse manure emitted a hot and pungent odor, mixed with the smell of fresh grass, constantly entering Chen Mo's nose. 2 soldiers were cooperating with each other, one pushing a cart and the other holding a shovel, shoveling away the horse manure one by one. More than 10 war horses in the stable are fat and strong, with smooth fur, indicating that the breeders are very attentive. The head horse snorted joyfully when he saw the horse official coming, and with a sweep of his tail, he threw down 2 piles of horse manure. Ah, good, good. Himagwan walked forward and affectionately patted the head of the horse's neck upon seeing this. You can't shovel feces like this, come with me, I'll take you to make feed. Himagwan looked at Chen Mo's skinny body and said. The 2 soldiers who were shoveling feces both looked towards Chen Mo upon hearing the sound, their eyes showing a hint of caution. Master, someone has come to help again, a robust soldier who shovels feces asked with a smile. That's right. Himagwan casually replied and took Chen Mo to a shack next to the stable. Inside the shack, there is a complete range of stoves and firewood, resembling a small kitchen. Can you make steamed buns? Himagwan asked, bringing 2 bags of flour. Yes, Chen Mo nodded repeatedly and couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Being able to make steamed buns means he has the opportunity to steal them. 20 pounds of white flour paired with 7 pounds of corn flour, with 3 or 2 ounces of salt, 2 spoons of oil, and 15 eggs. Himagwan explained the approximate formula for the feed. Warhorses are much more expensive than humans, and naturally they eat better than humans. Chen Mo immediately started to work hard. He had sold his body before, and he knew how to do all these miscellaneous tasks. Himagwan directly helped him with the strength required for the meeting. Where did you escape from? Officer, he skillfully squeezed out a steamed bun and placed it on the drawer. Qingzhou and in county. Chen Mo reported the only place names he knew. That's from the north. Back then, I also escaped from the north and was about the same age as you. Perhaps seeing people in similar circumstances, Hima's Mandarin became more common, talking about many past events. Chen Mo had a mixed response, with most of his mind resting on the nest in his hand. If it weren't for Himagwan's constant presence, he would have wanted to eat 2 raw cushions to cushion his stomach first. The 5 major cage drawers were quickly brought to the stove, and Himagwan supported his waist and slowly stood up from the stool. This steamed bun needs to be steamed for a while, and when it's cooked, it'll be taken out to cool down. He explained and was about to walk out, but his footsteps suddenly stopped. Don't steal too much, be careful not to hold on. He escaped the famine and knew what it was like to be hungry. The reason why he deliberately left now is to give Chen Mo a chance to steal food and let him cushion his stomach first. But he also understood that people who are too hungry may really push themselves to death the first time they eat. Thank you, Master He. I have a sense of propriety, Chen Mo said earnestly, deeply moved. He knew that the other person was taking care of him. Eating in one bite may not be precious, but it is very important to oneself now. Without further words, Officer Hima left the shack with his hands behind his back. The smoke from the stove is steaming, wafting out thick white mist one after another. Chen Mo waited anxiously on the side, feeling that time passed very slowly. After a long time, the steamed buns have finally matured by 7 or 8. Chen Mo didn't care about anything else. He first picked out 2 with chopsticks, put them in the well water in the basin to cool down, and then swallowed them whole. Wodu is really delicious. Chen Mo took out 2 more and swallowed them like the same method. The 4 steamed buns warmed up, and Chen Mo seemed to have come back to life. His mind became more vivid, and his mind could finally concentrate. Raising 2 ladles of water to extinguish the fire, Chen Mo opened the steamer one by one and waited for the nest to cool down. During the waiting process, he couldn't help but sneak a bite, weighing more than 2 taels. Chen Mo ate 12 or 3 more in a row until his stomach became round before stopping. Although he can still eat, he is afraid of holding himself up and dare not eat again. He could sense that as these foods were digested by himself, the strands of qi and blood power slowly flowed into the Huafan Zhu. When these steamed buns cool down, you come with me to feed the horses. Himagwan pushed a unicycle for feeding the horses over and saw that Chen Mo did not continue to eat steamed buns. His eyes couldn't help but show a hint of appreciation. Having been starving for a long time, it is quite rare to maintain self-control when facing food. Okay, Chen Mo responded, taking advantage of the time to dry the steamed buns to clean and tidy up the shed. Ma Guan leisurely lit the dry smoke and looked at Chen Mo with a satisfied expression. There were hard-working people in his eyes, no matter where they went, they wouldn't bother anyone. The shack was cleaned, and the shacks had also cooled down. They were gradually poured into the unicycle, and Chen Mo took the initiative to push the cart towards the stable. This kind of refined grain needs to be fed twice a day, and you will be responsible for it from now on. Walking into the stable, officer he carefully explained and instructed Chen Mo to pour the steamed buns into the trough separately. When pouring, don't let the quantity difference be too much, otherwise they will be in a hurry. Ma Guan smiled and patted the head of one of the horses. After feeding the horse, Officer Ma arranged accommodation for Chen Mo again. Living in a barracks on the left side of the stable with another groom, although the smell is a bit unpleasant, it is still stronger than living in a large bunk with dozens of other soldiers. The beds and bedding are already made, although I don't know who left them, they are still relatively clean after washing. Apart from a few clothes, Chen Mo had nothing to carry with him. Ma Guan gave him a towel for washing, 2 hair ties, and a thick porcelain bowl for eating and drinking water. He can be considered as temporarily settling down. As half a month passed, Chen Mo finally gained some flesh on his body and his complexion gradually turned red. We'll do it later, let's have dinner first, Ma Kai shouted, carrying a pot of mixed vegetables and 20 mixed noodle buns. Chen Mo heard the sound and quickly rinsed his hands in the horse trough. What's to eat today? He looked at Ma Kai and asked. The two of them have been living in the same room recently, and their relationship is quite good. Boiling cabbage with radish. Ma Kai felt helpless. Why the hell is this? It's been 4 or 5 days. Another groom Ding Bao couldn't help complaining. The colonel's family planted a lot of vegetables and sold them to the kitchen. Ma Kai lowered his voice. When can we, the captain, do some personnel work? Ding Bao shouted angrily. Drinking military blood has become commonplace, and these big-headed soldiers can only complain privately. Don't say it, let someone listen again, Chen Mo warned cautiously with a cautious expression on his face. There were no intrigues or conflicts among the three of them, mainly there was nothing to argue about. Ma Kai is physically strong and has some connections in the military. Coming to raise horses is just a temporary transition, and he will be transferred sooner or later. Chen Mo only cares about eating, as long as he can eat enough, he can say anything. Ding Bao has a straightforward personality and can only speak with his brain, but he is not a bad person. Plus, the age difference between the three is not significant, so Chen Mo and the two of them have been getting along quite well during this period. The food was placed on the table and served separately, and the three of them came together with Ma Guan. Let's all eat. Officer Ma held a bowl of tea brewed with eggs and added a lot of sugar before sitting on the table to invite the three of them to eat. This is his habit of eating a bowl of egg and sugar water every day, which even many small landlords may not be able to enjoy. Chen Mo has already started eating. To be honest, the taste of this food and steamed buns is not as good as horse grain. But with each additional bite of food, he can accumulate an extra strand of qi and blood. As his physical condition improves, he can accumulate more qi and blood every day. I don't know if it's because he's been hungry for too long and his body needs nutrition, or because of the reason for shedding the pearl, he can eat a lot more now than before. You are now in a relatively strong physique. Tomorrow, follow Ding Bao and the others to shovel horse manure, Ma ordered. The hardest job of feeding horses is nothing more than shoveling horse manure. A horse needs to pull around 20 to 30 pounds of horse manure every day, which is nearly 400 pounds of horse manure. It's not an easy task to shovel and transport them one by one. When Chen Mo first arrived, he was too thin and weak to work. Now that I've been raising it for half a month, it's not suitable if I don't work anymore. Okay, Chen Mo said, swallowing a slightly sore throat. Ding Bao and Ma Kai looked at each other, clearly having something on their minds, but it was difficult to speak now. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Methods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Methods. Chen Mo picked up a shovel of horse manure mixed with horse urine and carefully poured it into the unicycle. Ding Bao carefully taught him how to shovel feces in the most lightweight and effortless way, avoiding splashing feces and urine on his body. He has been a coachman for 2.5 years and has gained a lot of experience in shoveling manure. A cart of horse manure quickly filled up, and Ma Kai pushed the cart away. Before leaving, he gave Ding Bao a glance. Seeing both of them leaving, Chen Mo grabbed the apple used to feed the horse and took 2 bites hard. The horse let out 2 angry howls when it saw its fruit being stolen, but unfortunately it couldn't speak. Chen Mo quickly nibbled on half of an apple, and threw the remaining half to the roaring horse, scooping up feces again. Ding, BMW, and Kai did not leave for too long before pushing an empty car back. Let me tell you, Ma Kai glanced at Ding Bao. Chen Mo didn't say much, he understood that these 2 people must have some hidden things to tell him. We didn't tell you before that you didn't shovel feces. Now that you're also here to shovel feces, you need to know about this. Ma Kai didn't dare to speak loudly, his voice was lowered very low. We have been stealing horse manure all this time, selling it for 40 to 50 yuan a day. Horse manure is a good thing, especially when warhorses eat a lot of refined grains, the price of manure is even higher. Although these feces need to be sent to the colonel's field, they are stealing and selling some, and no one can tell. Previously, the 2 discussed whether or not to tell Chen Mo about this matter, because if he knew, he would have had an extra person share the money. But if we don't say it, we're afraid that he'll report and expose it when he finds out, so it's better to take advantage of this and drag him down now. Is Master He clear about this matter? Chen Mo asked the 2 of them. If Master He is also aware of this matter, then it doesn't matter if you divide some money yourself. It's not appropriate not to divide it. Just listening to his inquiry, the 2 of them fell silent for a moment. They certainly understood that it was best to bring He Ma Guan with them on this matter, but they didn't mention it at first, and the later they went on, the more hesitant they became to say it. If you do this, you won't be afraid of being discovered someday. Chen Mo looked surprised. He really didn't expect these 2 people to be so bold. If Master He also shared the money, even if the situation was exposed, in order to avoid being punished too harshly, he would still protect them to some extent. But Officer He Ma doesn't know about this matter, so if it were exposed, they would be considered light if they were killed by military law. Let's be careful, we shouldn't be caught, Ma Kai said in a lower voice. If people don't know, unless they don't do it themselves, since they have done this, it will only be a matter of time before they are exposed. What if? Chen Mo asked in reverse. Ma Kai lowered his head. His family does have some connections in the military, but they are not very strong, otherwise he wouldn't have to feed horses here. If this matter is really exposed, even if he can save his life, he will definitely be beaten with dozens of batons and driven out of the military camp. I didn't hear what you said, and I won't tell Officer He Ma either. I only shovel feces, and I won't ask about sending feces out. Chen Mo took the initiative to speak up, drawing a clear line with this matter. With the shedding pearl in his body, he only needs to slowly accumulate qi and blood, waiting for a rebirth and transformation. He doesn't want to get involved in this matter that may affect his own stability. But during this period, the 2 of them have also helped him a lot. Although it was just a small matter of borrowing soap pods or a bucket from him, he would never report or expose the 2 of them. At least we are also in the same league, you can't turn a blind eye to death. What should you do about this? We both listen to you. Ma Kai spoke anxiously, feeling anxious in his heart. His family had many connections before arranging his affairs after entering the military camp. If he were to be kicked out because of this, everything would be in vain. He lived in the same room with Chen Mo for half a month and knew that Chen Mo was definitely not an ordinary disaster victim. Because he actually knows characters, even if it's just a few, it's rare among a group of soldiers. So at this moment, looking at how much Chen Mo can help come up with an idea. One of the reasons why Chen Mo can read is that the characters in this world are more similar to the world he lived in before crossing over. Secondly, it was because when he first sold himself, he had a decent appearance. After doing odd jobs in the kitchen for half a month, he was transferred to work as a book boy and learned a few words from the experience. Either I don't do it anymore, or if I want to do it again, I'll give all the money I earned before to Master He and tell him everything about it. Considering that the two of them had helped him before, Chen Mo gave them some advice. As for whether to listen or not, it depends on themselves. After scooping up the 2 carts of horse manure and washing their hands, I went to steamed buns for the horses. I ate more than 2 pounds of steamed buns alone, and Chen Mo left an extra 8. The military camp only has 2 meals in the afternoon and evening, so there is nothing to eat in the morning. Therefore, when steaming steamed buns in the afternoon, 8 will be left. Tomorrow morning, each person can eat 2 to deal with their stomachs. After Chen Mo steamed the steamed bun and fed the horse, the 2 people who went out to deliver feces also rushed back with a foul odor. Mo gu. Ma Kai spoke affectionately, with a smile on his face. Although he was 1 year older than Chen Mo, he now called him brother with a shy face, indicating that he had something to ask for. What's going on? Chen Mo became vigilant in his heart, showing off his kindness without any ulterior motives. It's nothing, isn't it, just carrots and cabbage at the end of the day? I bought a chicken to give you a tooth flotilla. Ma Kai picked up a braised chicken wrapped in lotus leaves, emitting an oily aroma. On the way to delivering feces, the more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. The difference between his income of over 20 won a day and the cost he would have to pay if he were discovered was really huge. He wanted to stop, but Ding Bao was a bit reluctant. The 2 of them were now grasshoppers on the same rope and could only move forward and backward together. Even if we stop doing it, this matter may not be exposed in the future. After much deliberation, the 2 decided to use the second method proposed by Chen Mo. What's going on? You can tell me. Although Chen Mo was asking, he could vaguely guess 3 points in his heart. We both planned to listen to you and tell Master He everything about this, but since we have gone, we must be beaten and cannot succeed, so we want to ask for your help, Brother Mo. He rubbed his hands and smiled awkwardly. What the 2 of them have done, even if they hand over all the money, is definitely worth a beating. Therefore, the 2 of them dare not speak. Chen Mo has not yet participated in this matter. Let him go and talk first. Master He accepted the money, and his anger dissipated by 3 points. When he turned around, he could only reprimand them a few times and probably wouldn't beat them. Even if they get whipped, it's definitely lighter than directly hitting the gun barrel. Once he is injured, it will inevitably affect his strength. Even if his family has paved the way for him, he still needs to fight for some strength himself. Why don't you go on this matter yourself? What's the use of me going? Chen Mo shook his head and declined, as he didn't really want to get involved in this matter. Mo go, just help us this time. If you help us, we will each give you another coin later. Ma Kai gritted his teeth. This. Chen Mo hesitated slightly. 2 coins of silver was quite a lot, and he could buy a lot of meat to help himself accumulate qi and blood faster. Mo go, if you help me, we will become brothers from now on. Brother, let me tell you a good thing you absolutely don't know. Ma Kai looked serious. This should not have been told to others casually, but he can't care too much now. If Chen Mo is willing to help him, then he can tell him about this. If he is not willing, then he can be taken down. Besides, he understands that even if he doesn't say it now, everyone will know about it in 2 months. What's up? Chen Mo was quite interested. Ma Kai has some connections in his family, and what he said is probably not a lie. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Recruiting Private Soldiers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Recruiting Private Soldiers. This. Ma Kai's face showed a smile, unwilling to continue speaking. If Chen Mo helped him this time, he would have informed him of this matter. If you don't help him, he won't speak up about this matter for no reason. You two go get the silver, I'll go talk to Master He about this matter. Chen Mo pondered for a moment and agreed with ease. He is quite interested in that good thing. Ma Kai has some connections in his family, and what he said is probably not a lie. It's already ready, all the silver we've spent this time here. Ma Kai quickly took out a heavy gray-black cloth bag from his pocket, and at a glance, he knew that there were many copper coins inside. Chen Mo picked up the cloth bag and picked up the lotus leaf chicken before getting up and walking towards the barracks where Ma Guan lived. Upon seeing this, Ma Kading Bao also followed closely behind him. The barracks where Ma Guan resides are relatively more spacious, and the internal decorations and displays should be more complete. He was sitting on a recliner at the moment, smoking a dry cigarette without a trace. Seeing Chen Mo carrying a lotus leaf chicken, his eyes couldn't help but squint slightly. Why, are you treating me to chicken today, kid? No, this chicken was bought by Ding, BMW, and Kai to show filial piety to you. Chen Mo picked up a cloth and wiped the table, then untied the chicken and placed it on the table. The official Ma's face changed and his gaze turned to the door. If you don't have anything to pay attention to, you can either be a traitor or a thief. Chen Mo raised his eyebrows and eyes, with 7 or 8 guesses in his heart. You old man, do you know about the two of them secretly selling horse manure behind your back? With a cold snort, Ma Guan pulled off a chicken leg and looked out the door, saying, can they keep it from me for a day or two, and even a month or two? He has been working hard in this army for decades, and he is not clear about his methods. He had noticed this a few days ago, and the reason why Chen Mo was asked to shovel feces was to see if he knew about it and if they would keep it hidden from him together. If the three of them were really working together to hide from him, even if it would be difficult to replace them all at once, he would have to do so. Outside the door, Ma Kai and Ding Bao's faces turned white, their bodies were like sifting bran, and a burst of happiness filled their hearts. Fortunately, after listening to Chen Mo's advice, he took the initiative to hand over all this matter to Officer Ma. Otherwise, the only way to deal with them is through military law. Don't be too angry, the two of them have already realized their mistake. All the money they have made during this period is here. Chen Mo took the money bag and handed it to Ma Guan. He started to weigh it, and his anger suddenly decreased by 3 or 4 points. He was angry, not because he was angry with the two of them for stealing horse manure, but because they had been keeping it from him and not sharing the money with him. In my eyes, I have no sense of being a horse official. They didn't do this on purpose either. Don't be too angry, you old man. If you get angry, you'll break your body, Chen Mo comforted repeatedly. Get out of here. Officer Ma shouted angrily at the door. Ma Kai and Ding Bao were trembling as they lowered their heads and moved into the room. Today, for the sake of Chen Mo pleading for you too, I will no longer pursue your mistakes. The official Ma looked serious. He actually doesn't want to make this matter too big. If others know that something like this happened in the stable he manages, he will have to lose face along with it. He had previously thought that if all three of them kept it from him, he would have to replace them all. If only 2 people keep it from themselves, then give it a hard beating and wait for the outcome, there's no need to make a big fuss. And now that both of them have voluntarily handed over their greedy money, he cannot let them go either way. Thank you, Master He. The two of them were sweating profusely, and both breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts. Ma Guan didn't say much, but his gaze towards Ding Bao was still filled with annoyance and disappointment. It's okay for Ma Kai to keep it from him, but Ding Bao followed him for over 2 years and even kept it from outsiders. That's what makes him the most angry. Both of you should be honest with me in the future and stop worrying about things you shouldn't have, he shouted softly. The two nodded repeatedly and dared not speak a word. From now on, if there is such a thing again, I will divide the money in half, and you three will share the remaining half. Ma Guan had no intention of stopping this matter. Even though he has some status in this camp, his military pay is also sporadic, and it would be best if he could have some extra benefits. Ding Bao's expression was joyful. Originally, he thought that since his master had already known about this matter in advance, he might never be able to make money again in the future. Now it seems there is still hope, although we need to catch less, it is better than not having a single point. Not to mention the involvement of any officials, this matter can be more secure. It's done, let's all get out of here. Ma Guan waved his hand. Ma Keating and Bao were granted amnesty, with small steps but quite fast speeds. Chen Mo immediately stood up and wanted to leave, but was stopped by the official Ma. You should take a closer look at the matter of secretly selling feces, especially Ma Kai. Don't let him mess around anymore. He has some connections in his family that need to be transferred sooner or later. You still have to continue feeding horses with me here. Ma's tone was slightly slower and he spoke out to explain. Understood. Of course, Chen Mo knew that even a little bit of connections were connections. Ma Kai would not continue to endure here for too long like these big-headed soldiers. He only wants to accumulate energy and blood steadily now, and is unwilling to provoke other things. Take this chicken back and eat it, and you can also keep the money privately. Officer, he carefully counted out 110 copper coins from the cloth bag and handed them to Chen Mo. Ah! He didn't refuse this, carefully taking the money into his arms and carrying the chicken back to his camp. Ma Kaijing was lying in bed resting with a foul odor all over his body. Chen Mo had already become accustomed to the smell in the surrounding air, tore off a thick chicken leg, and ate it happily. Mo Gu is back. Ma Kai saw him return and quickly sat up from the bed. Master, he also asked you to bring back this chicken. As he spoke, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. The groom's treatment is much better than that of an ordinary soldier, but there is also little meat to eat, and on weekdays, he can only steal 2 eggs. Let's eat together, just tell me what's good about you, Chen Mo warmly greeted and pulled off a chicken wing to hand to him. Do you know General Sun Shoren? Ma Kai leaned in and whispered. Chen Mo shook his head lightly. He had only been here for a short time, and now he hasn't even fully understood the situation inside the military camp. In 1 or 2 months, General Sun will come and recruit our own soldiers, he said with a serious expression, clearly believing that what he said was true. Is this true? I've never heard of a general recruiting soldiers from a military camp. Chen Mo's tone was slightly skeptical and he wanted to use Ma Kai's words again. The so-called personal soldiers, also known as troops, are the most important troops for a general. Many times, whether one can win a battle depends on the number and strength of their own soldiers. And the most important thing for soldiers is to be close to the general. Generally speaking, either they are of the same ethnicity or hometown, and they are mostly related to the general himself. As for recruiting soldiers directly from the military camp, it is rare for a general to do so. You're not sure about this, right? As far as I know, General Sun won a great battle a while ago, but his personal soldiers suffered too much damage. Therefore, I hereby request your majesty to return to our Xinyuan mansion to guard and train troops. And General Sun is also from Xinyuan prefecture, that's why he chose his own soldiers from us. Ma Kai approached Chen Mo very close, his voice pressed even lower. There are many young people of the same ethnic group and hometown who have suffered too much losses at the moment, making it difficult to replenish them. If you want to recruit personal soldiers again, you can only expand the scope of recruitment and spend more time practicing. How did you know that this matter is so important? Chen Mo expressed doubt. The mobilization of troops and the appointment of generals can be said to be confidential information of the court. How could Ma Kai easily learn about such secrecy? I am a distant cousin who married General Sun's personal soldier. The court recently sent her compensation. My family inquired multiple times and only learned about this. Please don't tell anyone. The reason why Ma Kai only told Chen Mo about this matter without telling anyone else is because he also has his own selfish intentions. Being able to read and write, even if it's just a few, is rare among a large group of soldiers. Chen Mo, with his ability to recognize characters, may even be selected for the pro-military camp. When the two of them join forces, it will be better than going in alone. Even if Chen Mo did not choose a personal soldier, with his literacy skills, he is unlikely to continue to suffer at the bottom. Being friendly with him may be helpful to oneself in the future, and what one needs to pay is only news that will be known sooner or later. It can definitely be considered a steady profit without loss. Chen Mo silently recorded this matter in his heart. If he could become a personal soldier, not only would his treatment improve and he could accumulate more energy and blood, but most importantly, his status would also rise. Chen Mo has always remembered how to redeem Zhao Yu when the time comes. If it weren't for him giving himself the money for selling his body, it remains to be seen whether he is dead or alive now. If I had promised the other party to help her redeem herself, then this thing must be done. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Time and Day. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Time and Day. A robust young man with slightly dark skin was pushing a manure truck loaded with horse manure towards the outside of the barracks. Chen Mo has eaten a lot of food again in the past month, and has gained a profit from selling horse manure privately. He can buy some meat every now and then. So his physique is clearly much stronger than when he first started shoveling feces. The 200-pound one-wheeled manure truck can move in and out of his hands without any difficulty. Hurry up, let's hurry up today. Maybe we can go to the market and have a look, Chen Mo shouted to Ding Bao, who was also pushing the manure cart. Scraping and delivering feces is a hard work, so since Chen Mo was able to push the manure truck, the three of them began to rotate and rest. The soldiers in charge of guarding the gate have long been accustomed to them, covering their noses and waving to signal them to leave quickly. Pushing the small car for more than 10 miles, an old man in linen appeared on the roadside, holding a scale and carrying a basket. For convenience, it's the manure collectors who sell horse manure privately during this period to each other. Old man, hurry up, Chen Mo stopped the car and urged the old man's slow movements. The old man nodded in agreement, but his movements were not very fast. 44 pounds and 7 taels, I'll give you 40.5 pounds. How about 51? The old man raised the scale and carefully examined it before speaking. Chen Mo nodded satisfied and had no objection to the price. Although selling these shares directly to farmers for more than a dozen miles would be more expensive, the chances of them being discovered would be too high. And the purpose of trading with the other party is to be safe and worry-free. Even the elderly cannot betray them because they have a stable source of horse manure, and they can earn a lot more money from it every month. Taking the copper plate handed by the old man, Chen Mo counted it in front of the other person before putting it in his own wallet. After the transaction, both parties nodded and gestured, and Chen Mo continued to push the cart along the main road. Brother Mo, when you mentioned that General Sun is selecting his own soldiers, can we go in? Pushing the cart, Ding Bao took the initiative to talk to Chen Mo. Since Chen Mo gave them an idea a month ago to voluntarily hand over the matter of selling feces to Hima Guan, the two of them are not entirely convinced of Chen Mo, but they also show great respect and would like to hear his opinion on anything. As for the matter of personal soldiers, it was only after discussing with Ma Caishang that Chen Mo decided to inform him. The two of them have been keeping it from him, and it may not be possible to keep it from them all the time. If Ding Bao finds out that the two of them are hiding from him, it will actually hurt everyone's harmony. Ma Kai has connections, but Chen Mo doesn't. When he chooses to leave, he will have to continue to spend time with Ding Bao. Who knows, there's no charter for this matter. Let's feed the horses well, Chen Mo responded casually. He has accumulated nearly 70% of his qi and blood from the Tuofanzu in his abdomen, and now he only hopes that the time for selecting his own soldiers can be delayed. Although I don't know the specific criteria for choosing a personal soldier, as long as I can complete the first transformation and increase my strength, I should be able to choose one. The two of them pushed away from the main road, crossed a rural path, and arrived at a military camp. It's called a military camp here, but in fact, it's more like a manor. The 300 acres of land in the colonel's home are all cultivated by the soldiers stationed here. The harvested grain naturally belongs entirely to the colonel, and it is already considered good that the soldiers on the cultivated land can make a living. This treatment is not much different from selling themselves into slavery. Pour 2 carts of horse manure next to the manure pile, and the two of them push the manure cart away. After walking another 3 or 4 miles, the two of them arrived at the market that was about to end. Spending a penny and asking someone to help keep an eye on the small cart, the two of them immediately strolled around. Chen Mo has a clear goal, which is to eat meat. Chen Mo ate half of a pound of multiple dead dough pancakes wrapped in half a pound of soy sauce meat in just 3 or 5 bites. Feeding horses and shoveling manure itself is a physically demanding task, especially when it comes to replenishing qi and blood for Tuofanzu. Chen Mo's appetite is much higher than that of ordinary people. He took out a copper coin from his pocket and paid it to the vendor. He ate the remaining half of the pancake and then went to buy 1 pound of white sugar and half a pound of pork head for Himagwan. This was something he had already explained when he arrived, and he had already given himself the money. After buying these things and retrieving the unicycle, after a while, Ding Bao blushed and returned. Let's go. Chen Mo was not surprised by this, knowing that the other party had gone to the small wine stall again. By the time the two of them returned to camp, the sun was already westward. Walking into the steamed bun shed, Chen Mo lifted the pot and inside were 13 or 4 steaming buns. Not only did he steal this horse food, but everyone actually eats it, but others don't eat as much as he does. Chen Mo first ate 2 belly cushions, and the rest was prepared to be kept for supper. Going back, there will be a kitchen for meals. Eating too much now is not good. They have 5 coarse grain buns and a large bowl of vegetables for each meal, while the remaining soldiers only have 3. And the several personal soldiers of Colonel can not only eat fine grains every day, but also do not have to do the rough and miscellaneous work in the military camp. Even their clothes are washed and they can receive payment every month. And take a break every 10 days, give half a pound of wine and 1 pound of meat. This is just the treatment of a colonel's personal soldiers. It can be imagined that General Sun's personal treatment will definitely be better. Mo Gu. Ma Kai came back from the kitchen carrying food and greeted him loudly when he saw him. What's wrong? Chen Mo wiped the table and asked. Have you seen the notice posted in the camp? In another month, General Sun will be recruiting soldiers in our camp. Ma Kai's rough face was filled with joy. He entered the military camp to wait for this opportunity, and now he has finally arrived. Did you specify how to choose specifically? Chen Mo asked. There is still 1 month left. As long as there are no accidents, I can definitely accumulate enough qi and blood to undergo my first transformation. That's not to say, but I estimate it's probably a matter of comparing strength with lifting a stone, Ma Kai said confidently. It is impossible to select personal soldiers from a group of big-headed soldiers who have only done miscellaneous work and have not received much training, and it is impossible to assess military skills such as cavalry and archery. It should be testing strength to see the foundation of the body. As long as the foundation of the body is good enough, everything else can be trained slowly. Let's see then, I don't know if our brothers can choose one, Chen Mo replied. A month from now, whether it's far or near, it's important to accumulate more qi and blood after eating a full meal. I feel like I can do it, Ma Kai smiled confidently. The reason why he dared to join the army was because his physique was definitely strong, and among the three, he was also the strongest. Chen Mo smiled and didn't say much. He used chopsticks to thread through 4 steamed buns and brought the purchased white sugar and pork head to deliver to Himagwan. Master Chen Mo pushed the door and walked into the barracks. Himagwan is tidying up the brushes used for brushing horses, and warhorses need to be brushed frequently after a few or 7 romance. Most people don't use water and only use a brush to scrub away dust and mud. Brushing horses is also a labor-intensive and experiential task. Horses are fierce in nature, and among the grooms, only Master He can brush them. This is meat and sugar, and I have also brought you the steamed buns for dinner. Chen Mo placed the things he wanted to buy one by one on the table and took out 3 won from his pocket. The pig head meat was sold at a lower price until the end, leaving 3 won. After explaining the origin of this money, he took out 20.6 won and placed it on the table. The dung was sold for 50 won, and this is yours. Himagwan scanned the copper plate on the table and couldn't help but smile. He didn't ask others to help him buy things before, but he either occasionally made mistakes or forgot to buy, or was short of weight. Only Chen Mo has never been short of weight, and even when there is a change in the price of goods, he never covets a penny. Do you also know about General Sun's plan to recruit personal soldiers? He slowly put away the copper plate on the table and asked. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Perfect Chi and Blood, Rebirth and Transformation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Perfect Chi and Blood, Rebirth and Transformation. I know, Ma Kai told me. Chen Mo did not deny this. What are your plans? Officer Hima looked at Chen Mo. Although more than a month is not enough to see through a person, one can still see some clues. Chen Mo is different from other soldiers who go with the flow. He has more ideas and a more lively mind when it comes to doing things. And abide by the rules, know the size, and be diligent and agile in both hands and feet, making one's character more reliable. He has been watching and keeping in mind all this time, and can be said to be quite satisfied with Chen Mo. It can be said that besides being able to eat greedily, Chen Mo has no problem. I don't have any ideas, let's go back and try it out. It's not a loss. Actually, it's not just Chen Mo, but most soldiers in the camp have this idea. Whether it's successful or not, trying it out won't be a loss. If you're not selected, how about coming back and feeding the horses with me? Himagwan seemed to just casually ask. Chen Mo didn't think much and replied with a smile, then I must come back and feed the horses with you, otherwise what else can I do? Okay, let's go eat. Himagwan nodded lightly and watched Chen Mo's figure disappear into the room. He is already old and has been in the military for his entire life without a wife or children. He needs an apprentice to pass on his skills and help him care for his old age. He originally planned to let Ding Baolai, but Ding Baolai and Ma Kai had previously kept the secret of selling horse manure from him, which disappointed him too much. This sparked the idea of changing people. But now it seems that Chen Mo is pretty good, but he still has to endure, at least knowing his nature. For over a month, he could only know people and their faces, but it was difficult for him to understand their hearts. Chen Mo sat at the table in front of the shack, cleared out the remaining 20.41, and counted 8 won for each of them. A day's worth of money is not much, but over time it accumulates into a considerable amount. After eating for nearly a month, the turnips in the colonel's field have finally been eaten clean, so today I had boiled cabbage with potatoes. Although there is not a single star of oil and water, the salt taste is still sufficient. Even though the food in front of him was difficult to swallow, Chen Mo still ate it quickly. However, despite its unpleasant taste, it was much stronger than when he was a disaster victim. At night, he slowly ate the leftover steamed buns as a late-night snack, adding night food to the horses, and then found an opportunity to steal a pair to eat. In order to accumulate more chi and blood, he never misses every opportunity to eat an extra bite of food. Every day that followed, Chen Mo was doing similar repetitions, sending manure to sell for money, finding opportunities to steal horse food, and going to the market to get some meat to eat. Resting at home is to feed fine grains to steamed buns for horses and find opportunities to steal horse food. Until there were still 5 days left until the start of recruiting soldiers, Tuo Fan Zhu finally accumulated enough qi and blood. Chen Mo carefully sensed the molting pearl located in his abdomen, which had turned blood red all over his body and was filled with the power of qi and blood inside. Putting away the 6 leftover steamed buns, Chen Mo didn't rush to undergo a complete transformation. He is not sure what will happen when he undergoes a transformation, and if there is a significant change, he will inevitably be noticed as abnormal, which is not a good thing. It's better to wait for the silence at night and secretly find an opportunity to undergo a transformation. Pour the other cooled steamed buns into the feeding cart, and Chen Mo pushes the cart into the stable. A horse couldn't help but snort joyfully when it saw him coming. After pouring out the stable for these horses, I tidied up the stable and shed, and did some miscellaneous work. When it's time to serve, pick up the wooden basin used for serving vegetables and walk towards the kitchen. Today, the kitchen has made a rare improvement in the food. Eating stewed tofu with cabbage has a much stronger taste than stewed cabbage and potatoes with water. Chen Mo prepared the food and walked back to the stable, while Ma Kai and his companions happened to bring the manure back. "Oh, eat tofu today." Ding Bao was quite surprised. Even though he had been a soldier for several years, the number of times he ate tofu in the military camp was rare. "I had a good meal today, and everyone was in a good mood." "Mo go, I see that the bathhouse on the set has opened. Let's take a chance to wash up later," Ding Bao suggested after finishing his meal. A while ago, when it was warm, they could still use it for washing and bathing by sunbathing at noon. Recently, the weather has started to get cold this month, and they have never taken a shower again. "Don't go, it's time for General Sun to recruit his own soldiers in a few days. Go take a shower and then wash your body," Ma Kai said to stop. Although he is not clear about the specific conditions for recruiting private soldiers, he has put 100,000 thoughts into this matter and strives to become a private soldier through selection. Although there is a relationship in his family, it can only be used if he is motivated. If he is not motivated, then there is nothing. "Let's wait a few more days, anyway, it's just these days," Chen Mo agreed with a smile. After finishing their meal, they washed their hands and feet with cold water, and each of them went back to their rooms to rest. Late at night, although Chen Mo was extremely tired, he gritted his teeth and got up from the bed. There is also a curfew in the military camp. Once the curfew is reached, except for the sentry on duty at night, everyone must stay in their barracks. Even if they defecate or urinate, they must solve it inside the barracks. The stable is located in a remote area, and in order not to disturb the warhorses, there are few sentinels patrolling. By taking advantage of the darkness to find a secluded place, one can complete a transformation. Chen Mo quietly pulled out the door and arrived at the hay pile next to the stable, which was filled with stacks of coarse hay that warhorses usually eat. Having found a visual blind spot that was unlikely to be discovered by the sentry, Chen Mo lay down and sat in, his eyes slightly closed, gazing inwardly at the molting pearl in his abdomen. The originally transparent and colorless Hua Fan Zhu is now completely red in color. Rebirth and transformation. Chen Mo's mind twitched, and the accumulated qi and blood in the Shifanzu erupted, continuously gushing out from his abdomen and flowing towards his limbs, flesh, muscles, and bones. The hot and restless qi and blood surged within him, enhancing and strengthening his flesh, muscles, and bones, causing him to undergo transformation. Waves of qi and blood flow continuously from the abdomen into various parts of the body, and he can perceive his own changes very clearly. The muscles that used to be slightly tough due to long-term hard work are now becoming softer and more flexible. Chen Mo knew that his muscles were constantly tense because he did not get enough rest and developed inflammation. Now that these inflammations have disappeared, his muscles have become more active again. It seems that a rebirth can not only enhance one's own strength, but also cure injuries in this way. The process of transformation is not long, and the qi and blood inside the Jufan Zhu gradually deplete. If you want to undergo a transformation, you must accumulate more qi and blood. Every transformation is more difficult than the previous one, because with each transformation, one becomes stronger. The transformation ended, followed by waves of hunger. Chen Mo took out the steamed bun he carried with him and swallowed it in just a few bites. The feeling of hunger in the abdomen is only slightly relieved. He only feels light and comfortable all over now, with flesh and bones clearly stronger than before. As for how much improvement he has made in his own strength, he doesn't have the conditions for testing now, so he can only look back and see. Standing up and walking out of the haystack, Chen Mo's face suddenly changed. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Mist, Blood Monkey. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Mist, Blood Monkey. In front of him was no longer the stable barracks, rows of barracks had long disappeared, and only grey mist appeared one after another. Chen Mo was alert in his heart and reached back to touch the haystack. Even if one is reborn and wastes much longer time than one estimates, it is impossible for such a big fog to suddenly appear without any signs. Everything within reach was obscured, except for the grey and white mist and the haystacks behind him. He couldn't see anything, even the stable adjacent to the haystacks disappeared. To put it 10,000 steps back, even if it fogs, he has never heard that the fog somewhere will be grey. Chen Mo reached out and waved his hand in front of him, causing a slight change in the mist due to his disturbance, but the vast majority remained unchanged. He didn't speak and directly called out to others. Going out at night or shouting loudly in the military camp is a serious crime. Once discovered, at least 80 soldiers will be punished with a baton. If no one asks for mercy with money, it is basically no different from the death penalty. Chen Mo placed one hand on the haystack and the other hand touched the stable that should have existed. However, within reach, there was nothing but grey mist. Chen Mo took 2 deep breaths, forced himself to calm down, and pinched himself hard. The clear pain instantly transmitted to his brain. He really can't figure out what happened. It's impossible for him to be completely transformed and mentally deranged. He swallowed his saliva and quickly kneaded a few pieces of hay from the haystack behind him. Before long, a thin grass rope over 2 zhang long appeared in his hand. This rope was indeed rudimentary, but it was also sufficient for use. He was not sure what the fog in front of him was, whether it was too thick to cover up everything in heaven and earth, or whether other changes had occurred. If it weren't for the haystack still there, he might even suspect that he might have traveled to another world. After all, if this kind of thing can happen once, there is a full possibility of a second time. Tie one end of the straw rope to the haystack and hold the other end tightly in his hand, carefully leaning forward. If the distance was too short just now and you may not have touched the stable, then this distance is definitely enough now. As long as the stable still exists, you will definitely be able to touch it. However, until he could not see the existence of the haystack, the grass rope was stretched straight, and the places he could touch were still a void. Up, down, left, and right, in all directions, except for the fog, there is no other existence. Even the ground was shrouded in mist, and Chen Mo could step on it, but could not touch any grain of soil with his hands. In the mist, the ground he touched was flat, smooth, and sturdy, like refined steel that had been tempered through countless trials. Chen Mo walked around the haystack without giving up, but he still didn't touch anything. Except for myself and the haystack, the entire military camp seemed to be engulfed by fog, with nothing left. Of course, there is another possibility, which is that the military camp is still there, and I and the haystack have entered a world of mist. No matter which one, it has no meaning for one's current situation. I must find a way to get out of here, otherwise I will soon have to consider eating hay to survive. Waha! A sudden roar broke the silence of the foggy world. The sound seemed to be of some kind of animal, sharp and hoarse, as if two rough pieces of iron were slowly rubbing against each other, causing the listener's teeth to ache. Chen Mo followed the sound and saw a small humanoid creature that was only 3 feet tall, with sharp teeth and low stature. No matter how you look at it, this creature looks very much like a monkey. One unique difference is that it has no fur. The monkey's skin seems to have been peeled off alive, and its red and bloody muscles are directly exposed to the air, making the scalp tingle at a glance. Roar! The blood monkey screamed mournfully, his 2 pale eyeballs rolling around. Chen Mo's footsteps slowly slid backwards, and the blood monkey in front of him was too eerie and terrifying. If it was unnecessary, he didn't want to have any contact with it. But it twisted its head, staring straight at Chen Mo, and suddenly rushed towards him in the next moment. The blood monkey moves extremely quickly, like a bloody residual wind, and carries a rotten and foul smell. Chen Mo hastily set up a double fist block, but to his surprise, the blood monkey was surprisingly strong. Even though he had undergone a transformation, he could only barely resist it. Wah! The blood monkey couldn't make a single blow, roared again, and jumped away from afar. Chen Mo furrowed his brows and looked at his trembling arms. This blood monkey's whole body is as hard as refined iron, and although his strength is not much different from it, he is still a mortal body. If this continues, I won't be able to die at the hands of this beast a few more times. The blood monkey was extremely intelligent, seeming to recognize Chen Mo's weakness. He demonstrated with his teeth bared and his body kept circling around Chen Mo. Chen Mo felt a wave of regret in his heart. Although his days had been hard since he arrived at the military camp, he had finally settled down. Accustomed to a peaceful life, I didn't expect to bring a weapon with me this time. If there were weapons at this moment, at least I could still fight against this beast. But now with a pair of flesh palms, it's really difficult to fight this blood monkey with copper flesh and iron bones. In fact, this cannot be blamed on him. The situation he is currently facing and the scene he is experiencing is beyond what ordinary people expect. He had never thought or considered that such a situation would happen suddenly. If he manages to escape this time, Chen Mo has made up his mind that even if he sleeps in the future, he will have to carry a dagger in his arms. The blood monkey let out another mournful scream, his back arched at an extremely eerie angle, and then suddenly ejected, rushing towards Chen Mo's lower body. Chen Mo didn't dodge and kicked forward with all his might. His left leg was numb from the shock, and he just managed to stop the bloody monkey. The blood monkey opened its arms and tightly hugged his thighs, revealing its bloody jaws and ready to bite. Without hesitation, Chen Mo knelt down on both legs and pressed the blood monkey tightly under him, pressing his knees against the beast's chest and abdomen. Ha! The blood monkey roared unwillingly, with a stench of decay and countless blood mixed in, and rushed straight towards Chen Mo's face. It struggled to break free, waving its teeth and claws. Chen Mo ignored everything else, holding down the monkey's head with one hand and continuously pounding its neck with the other fist. The blood monkey's whole body was like a cast iron, only 7 or 8 fists long, and Chen Mo's finger bones revealed dense blood stains. He still gritted his teeth and punched the blood monkey one by one. In the current situation, one between him and the blood monkey is bound to die. Chen Mo doesn't want to die, so the only way is to send this beast to die. I don't know how many punches he threw with all his might, but Chen Mo felt that his arm had lost consciousness, and the blood monkey no longer struggled, gradually turning into a limp corpse. Chen Mo sat on the ground, panting heavily and looking at the motionless blood monkey in front of him. To his surprise, the corpse in front of him was disintegrating in just a blink of an eye, like a smoke that had completely dissipated. What remained in place was only a crimson blood stone the size of a baby's fist, with a rough surface covered in grooves. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Separation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Separation. Chen Mo picked up the red blood stone, which was very transparent, like a gemstone. However, in just a blink of an eye, the entire stone quickly dimmed and darkened, no longer the same color as before. Chen Mo couldn't figure out the changes in this stone, but he decided to put it away for now. Dang! A crisp gong sounded from near to far, followed by 2 consecutive strikes. Chen Mo remembered clearly that at this moment, the watchman in the military camp was ringing the gong to report the time. The gong rings 3 times, indicating that it is now 3 shifts. Although Chen Mo had never understood why people were still arranged to sound gongs in the military camp, hearing the sound of the gong made him feel extremely relieved. But then he realized something was wrong. If he could be inside the military camp, then what had just happened would surely wake up many people. Why didn't anyone come out to check the situation? With the sound of gongs, the fog in front of me quickly dissipated, and in just 2 or 3 blinks, the entire military camp reappeared in front of me. And he was right inside the haystack, which he had just avoided hiding. Looking at everything in front of him, he was a bit dazed, if it weren't for the wounds on his body and the red blood stone in his arms still existing. Chen Mo may even suspect that his recent experience does not exist, and everything is just his own illusion. Whether it's the bloody wound on the body, still conveying pain, or the dim red blood stone, it all proves that everything that just happened is indeed real. Chen Mo looked out through the gap between the haystacks, and the fog disappeared completely. The entire military camp remained silent there. Roughly sweeping through the broken clothes on his body, Chen Mo took them off and temporarily bandaged the wound to stop bleeding. Except for the thumb, the other 4 fingers on the left hand have different injuries, but he can roughly feel that they are all skin and flesh injuries, not bone injuries. As for the legs, they were scratched by the bloody monkey, but there was no bleeding despite being blocked by clothes. They only left dozens of blue and purple palm prints, which will take time to heal. Being reborn not only enhances one's strength, but also enhances one's ability to resist attacks. These injuries may seem quite serious, but they only affect the skin and flesh, and can take up to 10.5 days to recover. Just getting injured suddenly may affect the upcoming personal assessment. In the military camp, there is a shortage of medical supplies, but for ordinary soldiers, horses are not lacking in good medicine. When they use some secretly tomorrow, the speed of healing will be faster. I just need to find a way to cover up, otherwise I won't be able to explain the origin of the wound. After briefly dressing the wound, Chen Mo gritted his teeth and stood up from the haystack, carefully moving towards the barracks in the darkness. He had originally planned to undergo a transformation and make do overnight in the haystack to avoid being discovered by the sentries. Even if the sentry discovers him now, he dare not settle in the haystack. Being discovered by the sentinels may not necessarily mean death, but if one falls into the fog again and encounters other eerie creatures, they are afraid to really die. Cautiously returning to his barracks, Ma Kai snored loudly and slept soundly. Chen Mo had already gotten used to this and lay back on his bed with his body stretched out before he dared to relax. Finally, I have the strength to think about everything I have experienced before. From hearing the sound of gongs, it can be confirmed that I have never left the military camp, and may even have stayed in the haystack all along. But everything I have encountered in the fog cannot be fake. He may have been swallowed or taken away by the fog for some reason, and the haystack, because it was close to him, was also taken away. During this process, he was not completely engulfed or taken away by the fog, only a portion entered the fog. With the sound of gongs, the mist that wanted to take me away was dispelled, and I appeared again in the real world. The reason why gongs need to be played in military camps is because some people know that fog will appear, so they need to arrange for people to play gongs every day to prevent anyone from being swallowed up by the fog. Of course, this is just his speculation, and he is not clear about the specific situation. Is fog a natural phenomenon that occurs in this world, or is it due to its own transformation that it is engulfed by fog? And striking the gong did not dispel the mist, it was just a coincidence that I heard the sound of the gong as the mist was about to dissipate. He couldn't be sure if these were the situations, everything was just based on his speculation, he lacked too much information. However, one thing can be certain is that during the day and at night, when lying in the house with others, one will never fall into the fog. Otherwise, when I woke up at night before, I would have long been immersed in the mist, and I would never have entered this world for the first time so long after arriving. However, although he could be certain of this, he still took his only weapon, a dagger that was no more than 5 inches long, and carried it with him, so daring to sleep peacefully. One night was peaceful, and the next day was dawn. Chen Mo woke up early as usual. Rebirth and transformation really have a miraculous effect. The wound on my hand only scabbed overnight. At such a speed, I'm afraid my wounds will heal before the selection of personal soldiers. Chen Mo took advantage of the darkness and found a set of clothes with longer cuffs to cover the wound on his hand. This may seem a bit strange, but it's better than letting people see the wound directly. They don't usually receive much attention from these grooms, as long as they can keep it from a few around them. Anyway, based on the speed of wound healing, it is estimated that the scab will peel off in the next 2 days. As for the bruises on my legs, they have mostly disappeared overnight, and at most they can be cured by tomorrow. I don't worry about being seen when I put on my pants. You said our military camp is not in the county, which thief dares to steal from us without opening their eyes? The captain arranges for someone to sound the gong and wake us up in the morning, but why do they even arrange for someone to report the time at night? They don't even let anyone sleep. Chen Mo seemed to casually complain that if fog was a normal phenomenon in this world, then the indigenous people like Ma Kai might know more. Who knows, this is a long-standing rule, who dares to touch it? Ma Kai shook his head. In fact, he didn't understand why he had to sound gongs and report the time in the military camp at night even with light and dark sentries. The main purpose of arranging night watchmen to sound gongs and report the time in urban areas is to prevent and deter bandits. Along with reminding the people to be careful with candles, if there is a sudden fire at night, the night watchman will also sound the gong to remind the sleeping people to wake up. In the military camp, there are light and dark sentries guarding, and it is normal to arrange for people to report the time in the morning and evening, but it is somewhat unnecessary to arrange for night watchmen at night. However, this rule has been established for a long time and is very strict, so no one dares to change it. Chen Mo nodded lightly without saying anything, but he had a guess in his heart that the sound of gongs was mostly a means of dispelling the fog. Otherwise, this matter wouldn't have been executed so well. They are not border troops, and military discipline is a mess. The colonel, besides drinking blood and receiving empty pay, obviously does not have much enthusiasm for managing and training soldiers in the military camp. In this case, if this rule is still being well enforced, it indicates the necessity of its existence, and failure to enforce it may lead to problems. It seems that fog may be a common situation in this world, and the sound of drums and gongs can indeed dispel fog. Of course, these are just his speculations, and with his current status, it is impossible for him to have access to more detailed information. All he can do is stay calm for the next few days, waiting for the arrival of the personal selection. End of this chapter.